My CEO said, "You're still here. After the boardroom bet and my quiet, uncomplicated life was finished, you're still here." That was the first thing she said when she found me at my desk at 9:40 p.m., long after the floor had emptied, long after the cleaning crew had already vacuumed twice around my chair. I hadn't noticed the second pass. I had a spreadsheet open that no longer meant anything and a headache that had started somewhere around hour 11 of the day. I looked up. Vivian Cross stood in the doorway of the open office, blazer gone, sleeves pushed up, holding two coffees like she'd bought them for someone specific and was only now deciding whether that someone was me. Vivian was our CEO, 37, unreadable in meetings, famous around Halloway Systems for the way she could sit through a 2-hour budget review without once checking her phone. I had worked under her for 4 years, first in analytics, then running the West Coast operations desk, and in all that time I had never seen her outside a blazer. Never heard her voice do anything but land exactly where she wanted it to land, and never once imagined she would remember my name outside of a performance review. So naturally, I handled the moment with the grace of a man who had clearly practiced this exact scenario 0 times. "I was just leaving," I said, closing 3 tabs at once like that would erase the previous 3 hours. "You've been just leaving for 40 minutes. I watched you not leave twice from my office. You watch my desk, I watch the whole floor. You're just the only one still on it." She set one of the coffees down next to my keyboard without asking if I wanted it, which somehow felt less like an assumption and more like a decision that had already been made for both of us. "Is this a performance review?" I asked, because if it is, I'd like representation. Preferably someone who slept this week. "It's not a review." She leaned against the cubicle wall, arms crossed, coffee in hand. "It's collection of what? You don't remember." I did remember, I just hadn't expected her to. 3 weeks earlier, in a quarterly strategy meeting with 11 people in the room and 2 more dialing in from Chicago, our West Coast numbers had come in soft. And the executive team had spent 40 minutes explaining it away with phrases like asterisk market softening and macro headwinds and asterisk seasonal variance, asterisk, none of which were technically lies and all of which were, in the way that matters, cowardice with a spreadsheet attached. I said the market wasn't soft. I said we'd under-resourced onboarding for 6 straight months and everyone in the room knew it. They just didn't want it on a slide with their name near it. The room did the thing rooms do. When someone says the true thing out loud, it went very quiet, and several people found their laptops extremely interesting. Vivian looked at me across the table for what felt like an unreasonably long time and said, "Say that again." I said it again. Same words slower, because if I was going to lose my job, I wanted it to be for a sentence I actually meant. She didn't fire me. She said, "If you're right, I want a plan on my desk by Friday. If it works, you run the fix yourself. If it doesn't, you and I are having a very different conversation." Someone at the far end of the table, trying to lighten the mood, asked what happened if I turned out to be right. Vivian, without missing a beat, said, "Then he gets to tell me everything else I'm getting wrong over dinner, where nobody else in this room is invited to enjoy it." A ripple of laughter went around the table, the kind people do when they think something is a joke and they're relieved it isn't about them. I didn't laugh, neither did she. The plan worked. Onboarding completion went from 58% to 91% in 19 days, and the West Coast numbers turned around faster than anyone expected, including me. And now it was 9:40 on a Thursday, and she was standing in my cubicle holding 2 coffees, here to collect on a bet made in front of 13 witnesses that she had never once mentioned since. "I thought you forgot," I said. "I don't forget things, I filed it. You filed a bet. I file everything. It's why I know your birthday is in March, and you've never once taken the vacation days you're owed for it. That's mildly terrifying, actually. It's called being a functional executive. Most people call it micromanaging. I call it retention strategy." She took a sip of the coffee she'd apparently bought for herself. "Dinner, Friday. And before you ask, no, this isn't optional, and no, I'm not telling you why I waited 3 weeks. Can I at least guess? You can guess wrong. Which is usually more entertaining." I closed my laptop fully this time. "Fine, dinner, but I have conditions." One eyebrow went up, the same eyebrow she used to end contract negotiations 2 levels above my pay grade. "You have conditions. No talking about Q3. No talking about my performance review. And at some point during the meal, you have to say, out loud, that I was right in that meeting. You were adequately right. That's not an admission. It's the version you're getting tonight. She was already walking away, coffee in hand. When she added over her shoulder, without turning around, wear something that isn't a company polo. I've seen enough of those to last a career. I sat there for a full minute after she left, staring at the second coffee, trying to figure out whether I had just been complimented, threatened, or asked out, and slowly landing on the uncomfortable realization that it might have been all three at once. Word got around by Monday, the way it always does in an office that size, which is to say it got around by Friday afternoon, before dinner had even happened. You had coffee with Vivian Cross, Marcus said, appearing at my desk with the specific energy of a man who had been saving this sentence all weekend. Marcus ran client success 2 desks over and had the emotional discipline of a golden retriever that had just heard a car door. I had a coffee she bought and did not ask if I wanted. That's not a denial. It's not a confirmation either. You're doing the thing, Marcus said, pointing at my face like it had personally wronged him. The thing where you get very calm right before you're about to lie badly. I'm always calm. You're never calm. You alphabetize your snack drawer. That's organization, not anxiety. Jacob, he leaned on my desk with both forearms like he was settling in for a while. You had dinner with the CEO of the company on Friday. I know because I saw you leave in a shirt that has never once appeared in this office before. And Priya from her office confirmed a 7:30 reservation under the name Cross. You interrogated her assistant. I asked a professional question in a professional manner. You cornered her by. The elevator is a public space, he grinned. So how was it? I thought about lying. I decided, against every professional instinct I had cultivated over 4 careful years not to. It was good, I said. It was actually good, not weird good. Just good. Marcus's grin somehow widened past what I had thought was its structural limit. You like her. I respect her. As my CEO, you like her. I am not having this conversation at my desk. Fine, he said, already backing away, hands up. But for the record, I called it in March. When you started actually laughing at her jokes in all hands, instead of just doing the polite exhale thing everyone else does. There's a polite exhale thing, Jacob. Everyone does the polite exhale thing. You started doing an actual laugh. It was noticeable. He left before I could figure out how to respond to that, which was probably for the best, because I didn't have a response. I just had the uncomfortable, slow-dawning suspicion that everyone around me had clocked something months before I'd let myself admit it. Dinner had been at a small Italian place 2 blocks from the office, the kind with 8 tables and no sign visible from the street, which I later learned Vivian had chosen specifically because none of the board members had ever managed to find it despite 2 attempts. For the first 10 minutes we were both, somehow, terrible at this. She read the wine list twice without ordering anything. I asked the waiter for water in a tone that suggested I was being interrogated. When he came back to ask about appetizers, we both declined at the exact same moment, and then sat in a silence so loud it practically had its own zip code. This is ridiculous, she finally said, setting the menu down flat. I've closed 9-figure acquisitions without blinking. I cannot order breadsticks in front of one employee. To be fair, I'm not just one employee tonight. No, she said, quieter, like she was testing the sentence before committing to it. You're really not. That was the first real crack. By the second course, she was telling me about her father, who had built the first version of the company out of a garage in the 90s, and never once, not on the day it went public. Told her he was proud of her, only that she hadn't broken it yet. I told her about the year I nearly left corporate work entirely to teach high school economics, and how what stopped me wasn't fear of the pay cut, but the specific, addictive feeling of being right about something in a room full of people who'd assumed I wouldn't be. You like being right, she said. I like being useful. Being right is just how I prove it to people who need proof. She studied me the way she studied a slide that had finally balanced after 3 rewrites. That's the most honest thing anyone in this company has said to me in about 2 years. That's a low bar for a company this size. You'd be amazed how few people clear it, outside. After the check, neither of us moved toward the parking garage. This is the part, she said, arms crossed against the cold, where you go back to being an employee tomorrow, and I go back to being your CEO. And we both pretend tonight was about a bet. Is that what you want? She didn't answer right away, which, from Vivian, was practically a monologue. No, she said finally, but I don't know how to want something else without it costing me something I'm not sure I'm allowed to spend. Everything costs something. The only real question is whether it's worth the price. She stepped closer, close enough that the sidewalk stopped being neutral territory. That's a dangerous line to say to your CEO. You're the one who walked closer. I'm aware. I kissed her before either of us could turn it into a negotiation. She kissed me back like she'd been quietly rehearsing the decision for longer than she wanted to admit, and when we finally pulled apart, she let out a short breath and said, "Well, that complicates the org chart. Only if we tell the org chart. I run the org chart, Jacob. It finds out eventually. For 2 months, we were careful in daylight and reckless everywhere else. No closed office doors during business hours. No messages that would make Priya raise both eyebrows at once, though she raised them anyway, on principle. Because Priya had the situational awareness of a woman who had personally organized 4 corporate mergers and could smell a workplace secret from 2 floors away. We had dinners in restaurants she was confident no board member had ever heard of. We had quiet Sunday mornings at her place, where she made coffee like it had personally wronged her and insisted her one good pan was structurally superior to my entire kitchen, which consisted of 2 pots and a toaster I'd owned since college. This toaster is a museum piece, she said, holding it up like evidence in a trial. It's reliable. It's beige. Everything in your kitchen is beige. You live like a man who's afraid color might get audited. I like simple. You like invisible. She set the toaster down and looked around the small kitchen with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite fondness either. It's very you though, plain, orderly, nothing here that could surprise anyone. I didn't answer right away, and she noticed, the way she noticed everything. That wasn't an insult, she said, softer. I know, it's just accurate in a way I don't usually let people say out loud. She didn't push further. That was one of the things I learned about Vivian in those 2 months. She could dismantle a room full of executives without blinking, but the moment something real surfaced between us, she let it sit instead of grabbing at it. I found that I trusted her more for what she didn't say than for almost anything she did. One Saturday, she showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a grocery bag and an expression that suggested she'd already decided we were cooking, whether I'd agreed to it or not. I didn't know we had plans, I said, opening the door. We didn't. I got bored of my own kitchen and decided to critique yours instead. That's not how invitations work. I'm the CEO. I don't do invitations. I do announcements. She walked past me into the kitchen and started unpacking the bag with the brisk efficiency of someone running a much larger operation than a Saturday dinner. Also, I wanted to see where you live when you're not being useful to me. I'm useful to you right now. I'm about to chop an onion, under supervision. That's different. She opened one cabinet, found exactly one pan, and stared at it like it had personally insulted her family lineage. You own one pan. It's a good pan. You're 34 years old. I'm loyal to cookware. It's a virtue. It's a fire hazard waiting to be efficient. She set the pan on the stove anyway and started giving directions with the same tone she used to close acquisitions, calm, certain. Mildly terrifying. Garlic first, don't rush it. Rushed garlic tastes like regret. Is that a business principle or a cooking one? Both. Everything's the same principle if you zoom out far enough. We cooked, which mostly meant she gave orders, and I executed them while trying not to set off the smoke detector, which went off twice anyway, and both times she blamed the detector's sensitivity rather than anything either of us had actually done. Later, sitting on my 2 mismatched kitchen stools, she went quiet in the specific way that meant something real was surfacing. My father used to tap his ring on the conference table when someone was wasting his time, she said. Do you do that? No ring. I stare, apparently. According to Marcus, that's terrible. That's accurate, according to several witnesses. He wanted me ready before anyone thought I deserved the chair, she said, turning her water glass slowly on the counter. That's a heavy way to raise someone. It worked, though. Did it? She stopped just for a second. It worked for the company. I'm honestly not sure what it did to the rest of me. The old version of me would have rushed to fill that silence with reassurance. The way I'd filled every uncomfortable gap in every relationship before this one, patching the moment closed so nobody had to actually sit inside it. I didn't do that this time. I just leaned against the counter and let it stand. You don't have to answer that tonight, I said. She looked at me, something shifting behind her eyes. That was annoyingly decent of you. I have moments, don't collect too many. I'll start expecting them. We ate at the counter, plates balanced on our knees because I owned exactly 2 stools and no table worth mentioning, and when she reached over afterward and took my hand. It was a small gesture that carried far more weight than its size suggested. I'm good at controlling rooms, she said. I've noticed I'm not always good at this letting someone actually matter. Neither am I admitted, but I'm trying. No speeches. I left my podium at your door. Good. Mine's in the closet, next to the good pan I don't own yet. She laughed and squeezed my hand once, and for a while the quiet between us wasn't something either of us needed to fill. At the office, we became experts at being unremarkable. A meeting would end and she'd say, "Jacob, stay 2 minutes," and then ask one real question and one that wasn't. "How's the onboarding fix holding at scale?" "Holding at 92%, better than projected." "Good." A pause. "Did you replace the toaster?" "Absolutely not. You're emotionally attached to bad appliances. That's concerning for a man in operations. I find it comforting." It respects the process. She almost smiled at that, quickly, before catching herself, the way she caught most things before they escaped into a room that wasn't supposed to see them. 3 weeks into whatever this had become, Vivian called me into a strategy review. 6 people sat around the table, Priya taking notes, 2 directors dialing in from remote offices, Marcus pretending not to watch me too closely, and Vivian at the head, fully back in CEO form. Navy blazer, clean posture, a face that gave away exactly nothing. "Jacob," she said, "operations perspective." I gave the update. Client onboarding was stable, but we had a staffing gap opening up in the Denver office, and the product team kept revising integration requirements every few weeks. Which meant every revision cost us 2 days of rework downstream. Devin, who ran product, leaned back in his chair. "That's a little dramatic. It's a little accurate. We're all under pressure here. Then stop adding to mine with late-stage revisions." Priya tapped her pen against her notepad without looking. "Up." "He's right, the cost variance is already showing in the numbers." Vivian looked at Devin, not unkindly, but with the specific stillness she used right before ending an argument. "Freeze the requirements by Friday." Devin blinked. "That's aggressive." "No." Aggressive was pretending the timeline could absorb your team's hobby projects indefinitely. Marcus coughed into his fist, badly disguising a laugh. Vivian's eyes flicked to me for exactly half a second, not a stare, something quieter, something that felt like being chosen from across a crowded room without a single visible sign of it. I'd learn later that this was one of her specific talents. Vivian didn't stare. She noticed. There was a difference, and it was, I discovered, dangerously easy to get used to. After the meeting, I found an email waiting from her. Subject line, strategic honesty. It read, "Your phrase from the meeting has been stolen." "I'm using it in the board deck." I wrote back, "I'll invoice you." She replied, "Dinner already covered the invoice." I typed, "Bad garlic doesn't count as payment." 30 seconds later. It was artisanal garlic. I stared at the screen longer than the message warranted. Marcus rolled his chair over from 2 desks away, uninvited as always. "You're smiling at your inbox. I'm reacting to competent leadership. Is that what we're calling it now? Get back to work, Marcus." "Yes, honey," he said, already rolling away before I could throw anything at him. One Thursday, Vivian came down to the operations floor, with Priya trailing a step behind. Carrying a tablet she wasn't reading, and an expression that suggested she'd rehearsed the next 5 minutes in the elevator. Priya reached my desk first. "She wants 5 minutes." I glanced past her. Vivian was standing exactly 9 feet away, pretending to study something on her phone. "She's right there," I said. "Yes." "But she asked me to make it feel official." "That's a very specific request," she said, and I'm quoting directly. "Can you see if Jacob has 5 minutes?" which in executive translates roughly to "make it feel official." "I'm surrounded by amateur diplomats," Vivian said. Arriving at my desk without acknowledging, she'd heard every word. "Competent diplomats," Priya corrected, already walking away with the specific satisfaction of someone who knew she'd get the last word. I stood. 5 minutes for what? Walk with me. We walked past the glass-walled offices toward the back stairwell, an empty conference room waiting near the end of it. She stepped inside and left the door open smart, careful, still technically a boundary even as we both understood it wasn't much of one anymore. Everything okay? I asked. Yes, that was a suspiciously fast answer. You ask like a man expecting bad news. I work here. I've learned to expect it on a rolling basis. She gave me a sideways look and finally turned the tablet around a draft restructuring plan for client support, thinner staffing. Tighter coverage windows, a chart that made the savings look elegant and the risk look like a footnote. This cuts too close to response coverage, I said after scanning it once. I thought so too. Then why show me? Because Devin says it saves money. The board says it reads as discipline. And I need someone in this building who will tell me the truth without checking which way I want to hear it first. You already knew the answer. I wanted to hear you say it out loud. Confirmation is a luxury I don't get to have very often. That's dangerously close to using me as a conscience. I have one already. It just enjoys backup. I handed the tablet back. Then here's backup, don't do it. She nodded once like she was filing the decision away permanently. Thank you, I should have left it there. I stayed in the doorway instead. What? She said, catching it immediately, the way she caught everything. This is the third time this week you've asked me for an opinion you already had. Maybe you're useful. I'm definitely useful. And modest, not when accuracy is on the table. Her smile faded, not into sadness, into something more careful. You don't act nervous around me. I do. I'm just disciplined about hiding it. No, you push back. Most people around here don't. Then most people aren't doing their job. That's exactly why I keep asking, she said. I wanted the dinner to stay normal. It didn't. No, it really didn't. Someone laughed further down the hallway, and the sound pulled the office back around us like a held breath finally releasing. She stepped away first. Go, before Priya starts timing us. She already is, probably from the elevator. Priya's voice carried down the hall without either of us seeing her. 4 minutes, 51 seconds. Efficient. Vivian didn't miss a beat. Put it in my annual review. The board first surfaced trouble on a Tuesday morning that started with a calendar invite titled * Strategic Alignment Session. Sent at 11:40 the night before to a distribution list that did not include me or Vivian until 40 minutes before it started. I found out the way people usually find out about disasters in a company that sighs secondhand, in a hallway, from someone trying and failing not to smile about it. You seen Vivian this morning? Priya asked, appearing at my desk with a folder held too tight against her side. Not yet. Why? She's up with the board, emergency session. Priya's voice dropped. They moved the vote up. What vote? She didn't answer, which told me more than an answer would have. I went up anyway, not into the room, but close enough to the glass to see it. 2 board members and a governance consultant with the specific, bloodless calm of a man who had personally delivered bad news to a dozen executives and slept fine every night since. And Vivian standing at the head of the table, not sitting, which told me everything I needed to know about how the conversation was going. Grant Whitfield led the board's finance committee, 61, silver-templed, the kind of calm that made junior staff nervous without him ever having to raise his voice. He came out of the room first and found me loitering by the glass with an expression that suggested I should already be somewhere else. Jacob, he said. Operations isn't part of this conversation. Good morning to you too. His smile thinned by exactly 1 degree. This requires discretion. Then maybe don't hold it in a glass conference room. Vivian came out behind him, composed in the specific. Careful way people are composed when they're one wrong word away from not being. Jacob, she said, not Grant, me. You okay? Grant answered before she could. Ms. Cross is stepping back to focus on strategic ownership matters while the board appoints interim leadership. I asked her, I said, still looking at Vivian. Not you. I'm fine, she said. She wasn't. I'd learned her tells by then, and the flat, careful stillness in her face was the loudest one she had. The board has voted, Grant continued, adjusting his cuff like the sentence needed accessorizing, to bring in interim leadership while Ms. Cross remains a significant shareholder and advisor. 41%, I believe. 41, Priya said quietly from the end of the hall, arms crossed, is not a footnote, Grant. He glanced at her, decided not to engage, and looked back at me instead. We appreciate operations staying focused during the transition. I hope the board documented the operational risk of changing leadership mid-quarter, I said. Because if the fix I built holds together without her strategic oversight, that's going to be an awkward thing to explain to the same investors you're trying to reassure. Grant's smile went colder. That's not your concern. It's exactly my concern. I'm the one who has to keep client accounts stable while you explain this to the market. So don't confuse discretion with obedience, because I'm not offering either. Vivian's eyes flicked to me a warning, gratitude, and a hard stop all in the same half-second. Jacob, I heard it. I stopped there and let Grant have the last word, because I understood, even furious, that this wasn't the hallway to fight in. Word moved through the building the way it always does, fast and wrong in most of the specific details, but entirely correct in the general shape of it. By lunch, the new interim CEO's name was already circulating. Roger Castellan, brought in from a private equity portfolio company 2 states over, a man whose entire professional personality, I would learn within the week, revolved around the phrase * cross-functional alignment. I called Vivian that evening. She didn't pick up. I called again at 8. Nothing. At 9:15, a text arrived. Come by if you want. I drove over with too many thoughts and no clean way to organize them. She opened the door before I finished knocking. Hey, she said, normal clothes, hair down. Face arranged into something that looked calm if you didn't know her, and looked like a controlled demolition if you did. Tell me the truth, I said, stepping inside. That's a rough hello. I can handle rough. Can you? She turned toward the kitchen, poured a glass of water she didn't drink. It's not as bad as it looks. I keep my shares. I'm not destitute. I'm not helpless. I didn't say any of that. Then what do you want me to say? That it hurt. Her jaw tightened. I waited. She gave the smallest possible shrug, the kind that costs more than a large one. I've been tired for years, Jacob. Maybe this is a relief. That sounds like a sentence you prepared for people you don't trust. Her eyes sharpened. Don't push. I'm not pushing. I'm standing here. You want me to fall apart so you can feel useful. That landed, and she knew it had, the instant it left her mouth. No, I said, keeping my voice level even though something in my chest had gone tight. I don't need to save you. I know you're not helpless, but you don't have to perform for me. Not here, she looked away first. I don't know how to be anything else with someone watching. Then practice badly. I'm not going anywhere. A short, humorless laugh escaped her. That's your romantic offer. Practice badly. It's the only honest one I've got. She covered her face with one hand for a second, then lowered it, annoyed with herself for needing to. I was scared you'd realize I'm a lot less interesting without the title. That's insulting to both of us. I know, she crossed her arms. I don't know what I am without it. You're Vivian. That sounds like something off a coffee mug. Fine. You're sharp, difficult, weirdly territorial about a frying pan, and better at making hard calls under pressure than anyone I've ever worked for. And you're allowed to be furious about losing something you built. She stepped into me before I finished the sentence, not gently. And I held her while she stopped managing the moment for the first time in 3 days. She didn't fall apart the way it happens in movies. She got angry, then quiet, then angry again, said several things about Grant Whitfield that would not have impressed anyone's grandmother, and then apologized for crying. And then got irritated with herself for apologizing. I hate this, she said into my shoulder. Reasonable. I hate that you saw it. I'm not enjoying it either. New territory for both of us. She laughed, wet and short, against my shirt, and for a while that was enough. No fixing, no speeches. Just 2 people sitting on her kitchen floor, because neither of us had thought to move somewhere more sensible. The weeks that followed were worse than the vote itself. Roger Castellan arrived with an expensive haircut, a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second too long, and the deep institutional belief that any problem could be solved by renaming a department. He called me Jason twice in our first meeting. It's Jacob, I said the second time. Right, we're all adjusting. He wasn't adjusting. He was rebranding, which is different and worse. He wanted the department leads to publicly support the transition. He wanted me, specifically, to stand up at the next all hands and describe the leadership change as an opportunity for renewed operational discipline, a phrase someone had clearly workshopped in a conference room I was grateful not to have been in. No, I told him, the printed talking point sitting between us on his desk, Vivian's old desk, though the nameplate had already been swapped. Jacob, I need team players. You have one. That's why I'm telling you before you put me on a stage. Careful with your tone. My tone is the polite version. Grant dialed in from a screen mounted on the wall. Folded his hands the way men do when they think the gesture alone conveys authority. Is there a problem? Yes, you want me to sell a transition I don't believe happened for the reasons you're claiming. You're an employee, Jacob. Your role isn't to litigate board decisions. I'm not litigating anything. I'm declining to be a prop. Roger frowned. Excuse me, sorry, sensitive history with props. Nobody laughed. I placed my own version of the remarks on the desk. Client timelines, staffing numbers, risk mitigation, all fact, no fiction. I'll present operational reality. I won't perform your narrative. Grant's eyes narrowed on the screen. And if that's unacceptable, then don't put me on the agenda. Roger looked between the screen and me for a long moment, then exhaled. Fine, facts only. Good. Facts don't need rehearsals. I walked out of that office lighter than I'd walked in, and I knew, somewhere underneath the relief, that I'd just made myself a problem in a building where I no longer had the protection I used to have. Vivian and I still saw each other, but the E's had trouble finding room. She joked too brightly. I got too careful. We became experts at protecting each other badly, which is its own kind of exhausting. One night at her place, over pasta she'd made with more determination than skill, she mentioned taking a month off. I could travel, she said. See something that isn't a spreadsheet. You hate airports. I could learn to like them. You once called airport seating a structural failure of modern civilization. It is, she set the spoon down. You don't have to sell me the honest version of how I'm doing. I'm not selling anything. You're wearing the smile you use on investors, and you're wearing the guilt face. I have several faces. That one's my least favorite. She crossed her arms. What do you want from me, Jacob? The truth. I don't know what the truth is yet. I believe that. But you keep waiting for me to decide you're destroyed, when what's actually happening is you're relieved and furious at the same time. And you won't say either one out loud because you think it makes you look inconsistent. She went quiet for long enough that I thought I'd overstepped. Then quietly, that's annoyingly accurate. I have moments. Don't collect too many, I'll get suspicious. We finished dinner. We talked about safer things. When I left, she kissed me at the door, but it felt like a promise with the date left blank. The next morning, Roger's assistant forwarded me a revised all-hands agenda with my section already rewritten, the same soft, dishonest language I'd refused a week earlier. Dressed up slightly differently and slid back in when he thought I might be tired enough not to notice. I wasn't tired enough. I wrote my resignation letter that afternoon, not out of anger, not as a gesture, not to prove anything to Vivian or the board or anyone watching. I wrote it because I realized I could not keep lending my competence to people who used a bad quarter as an excuse to do what they'd clearly wanted to do for months and call it governance. I signed it the next morning and put it on Roger's desk. He read the first line and looked up. You're serious? Yes, this is a mistake, possibly. You don't have another position lined up. No, that's reckless, maybe. It's also honest, and honesty's been underrepresented around here lately. He stood, like standing might add weight to what he said next. This won't bring her back. I know, it's not supposed to. It tells me who I actually work for. You work for yourself now. I smiled at that, more than the moment probably deserved. Look at that. You do understand. Marcus caught me in the hallway while I was carrying a half-empty box out of my old cubicle. You absolute idiot, he said, but he was smiling. Good to see you too. You could have waited. I did. Just not long enough for it to look strategic. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're right. That sounded like it hurt to say. It did. Don't make me repeat it. He grabbed one side of the box before I could stop him and walked it to the elevator with me, not saying much else, which for Marcus was its own kind of support. Vivian opened her door that afternoon wearing no mask at all, which scared me more than any version of her I'd seen in the previous 3 weeks. She looked at the box in my arms. What did you do? I brought my mug. Jacob, I resigned. No, I'm fairly sure I did. Roger read it slowly, but he got there eventually. She stepped back from the door. Come in. Before you say anything else, before I say anything, you resigned. Without talking to me first. I did. Do you understand the problem with that? I do. Then why are you standing there like you just returned a library book? Because I'm trying not to make this. About panic, it looks exactly like panic. Then look harder, I said. More gently than the words sounded. I didn't quit to buy your gratitude, Vivian. I quit because I couldn't keep being useful to people who'd used a bad quarter as a door they'd already been trying to open. It still changes both our lives. You don't get to decide that unilaterally. I'm not deciding what it means for you. I'm telling you what it means for me. She looked away first, her hand resting on the console table like it might hold her up. I lost my company, Jacob. I know. No, you know the facts. You don't know what it felt like to stand in that room and listen to Grant describe my father's life's work as an asset class. I stayed quiet because there was nothing useful to add to that. I told you I was relieved, she said, voice tightening, because I couldn't stand the idea of you looking at me like I'd been reduced to something smaller. I never saw you as reduced. Yes. You did. You saw me hurt. That's not the same thing. That's just human. I don't know how to be human with someone watching, then be bad at it. I'll bring snacks. That broke something in her face, not a collapse, just a small, surprised laugh that arrived before she could stop it. That's the least romantic offer I've ever received. It's the most honest one I had available. She stepped into me then, not gently. And I held her the way I should have let myself hold her 3 weeks earlier, without waiting for permission first. I love you, she said into my shoulder, muffled and unguarded. I don't need you to say it back right this second. I love you too, I said anyway. You don't get to control that timeline. Insufferable. Learned it from you. The months after that were not tidy. I did some independent consulting. She took meetings with people who'd once been too intimidated to call her office directly, and now called her cell without hesitation. We had bad days. Hers usually arrived sharp and sudden, when the loss of the company caught up with her sideways. Mine arrived quieter, guilt sneaking back in wearing a responsible expression, convincing me I should have stayed and fought from inside instead of walking away. Once, after a potential client delayed a meeting with her for the second time, I said, maybe if I hadn't. She pointed a fork at me before I could finish. Finish that sentence and you're eating dinner alone. I was going to say if I hadn't burned the garlic. No, you weren't. No, progress is honesty. The garlic is also genuinely bad. It's terrible, she agreed, and we laughed, and then we started again, the way we kept starting again. The idea for the company began at her kitchen table, under the disapproving judgment of my beige toaster, which she still refused to let me replace. On the grounds of what she called historical accountability. She'd been quietly advising small operators who needed real operational clarity without corporate theater attached. I'd been doing the same work from the ground level, informally, for anyone who'd listen. One night she slid a notebook across the table toward me. We could build this properly. I looked at the numbers she'd already sketched out. We could, not Halloway. Not another machine that eats people and calls it growth. That slogan needs work. I'm serious. I know partners, equal, she said. Equity equal, decision rights equal. We argue until one of us becomes reasonable. That might take years. I'm budgeting for it. She looked at me, steadier than I'd seen her in months, and we don't disappear into the work. That's a rule, not a suggestion. Good rule. We launched 5 months later out of a small rented office above a physical therapy clinic. Because apparently my life has a sense of humor, and it involves hearing someone groan through resistance bands during client calls. No board, no Grant Whitfield, no Roger calling me Jason in front of investors. Just clients, real problems, real decisions, and the daily, ongoing challenge of loving someone who could read exactly when I was avoiding a hard conversation before I'd finished the first sentence of avoiding it. We hired Priya 3 months in. She walked into the new space, looked around at exactly 2 desks and one very stubborn toaster and said, "This place needs adult supervision." Vivian hugged her. Priya looked at me over Vivian's shoulder and said, "And a better toaster. I'm being attacked in my own company." Our company, Vivian corrected, not looking up. That sounded expensive. It will be. Marcus sent referrals from his new role 2 companies over. Roger lasted 11 months at Halloway before the board quietly replaced him too. And Grant kept his board seat, but watched the company lose 2 of its biggest accounts after cutting the exact support coverage I'd warned them about months earlier. In a hallway he'd told me wasn't my concern. Vivian read the news about it one evening, set her phone face down on the counter, and said mildly, "That's unfortunate. Your face disagrees. My face has no comment. Your face is holding a small, tasteful parade, quiet, we didn't build a perfect life. Perfect lives mostly belong to people writing about themselves in company newsletters. We built a real one-client calls, late invoices, disagreements that turned into good arguments, and mornings that meant something entirely different than the first one ever had. A year after the bet, I woke up in what I still occasionally, out of habit, called her apartment before correcting myself to ours. She was in the kitchen, wearing my old university sweatshirt. Already 3 sentences deep into thinking about a client proposal before either of us had said a word out loud. I leaned against the counter. She looked up. "You're still here," she said, echoing the first sentence she'd ever said to me on purpose, the way she did most things. "Say that again," I said. "You're still here, every time." She handed me coffee without asking, the same way she had that very first night, and I thought about the beige kitchen. The toaster she still refused to let me replace, the box I'd carried out of an office I used to be careful in, and the woman who'd learned, slowly and badly and honestly, how to let someone watch her without performing for them. "Regrets?" she asked, watching me over the rim of her mug. I thought about it, genuinely, the way the question deserved. "No," I said. "But I still think the bet was rigged from the start." "It was. You admit that now." "I admit whatever gets you to stop bringing it up during breakfast." We got a small write-up in a local business journal about 6 weeks after the launch. Nothing dramatic, a few hundred words about operational consultants with an unusually blunt approach. Vivian printed it out and stuck it to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a tomato, which felt like the least on-brand decorative choice either of us had ever made and somehow fit perfectly. "You're framing a magazine clipping," I said. "On our refrigerator, it's a validation artifact. It's a fridge magnet holding up a printout. Everything is an artifact if you contextualize it correctly. I learned that from a board deck once. Possibly from Grant, which is annoying, because it means he was occasionally right about something. Don't tell him that. His ego doesn't need the calories." She laughed, and it was an easy laugh now, not the rehearsed CEO version I'd first heard across a boardroom table over a year earlier, just a real one, unguarded. The kind she used to catch herself doing and stop. That evening, going through old email while setting up our new client management system, I found the message chain from that very first bet 13 people copied, 4 replies. The last one from Vivian, sent at 11:58 p.m. The same night dinner stands. "Don't make me remind you twice." I showed her the screen. She read it, exhaled through her nose, unimpressed with her own past self. "I was very dramatic," she said. "You were very you. Is that an insult? It's the reason we're standing in a kitchen with a fridge full of tomato magnets, instead of me still filing expense reports for a man who calls me Jason. Jacob, he never once got it right. Not once in 11 months. I fired him in spirit years before the board actually did it," she said. "I just didn't have the paperwork. You have the paperwork now. I have better things. I have a company with your name on the door and mine, and a toaster you refuse to let die with dignity. That toaster has seen things. It's earned tenure." She shook her head, but she was smiling, and she reached over and closed my laptop, gently, the same way she used to close conversations in the old office final, unarguable. But this time without a single thing behind it that either of us needed to be careful about. "Come to bed," she said. "The client proposal can wait until morning. You never let anything wait until morning. I'm practicing." "Badly, like you said. Progress," I said, and followed her out of the kitchen, past the fridge, past the framed clipping, past the whole small, unglamorous, entirely real life we'd built out of a bet neither of us had planned on taking seriously. She kissed me before the coffee got cold, and I let myself, finally, stop checking for the exits. "Would you have taken the bet that night, or walked away before it started? And do you think Jacob was right to resign, or should he have stayed and fought the board from the inside?"